This week on All the Stars Sailing Adventures, I'll take you through how we replaced our old manual anchor winch with an electric one.
Welcome back to All the Stars Sailing Adventures.
Join us, Rachel and Jess, on our Cavalier 37, All the Stars, as we live and learn about life on the water. Hit that subscribe button, guys. So today I have some exciting news. We are going to be installing a new windlass. So the boat is currently fitted with a manual windlass, which is great in that it's simple and fairly fail-safe. The only downside is for single-handed sailing or trying to retrieve the anchor in strong conditions, it can be really onerous to be winding that in. So to reduce the risk of injury or strain, I've decided to launch into a crazy project of installing an electric one. That's our new electric winch. That's just the winch body part. This is from Muir, Australian company. They build very good electric winches. And there's our motor section, which clips on. So the first thing I'm going to do is run the cables. I run the cables through the boat to where we need them. And then I'll be going through swaging on terminal ends and connecting up extra accessories that are important as part of the circuit that include a circuit breaker, a reverse solenoid controller, and the pendant controller so that I can control the winch from at the front of the boat. We have quite a small anchor well, so I'm hoping to set this up so that it can be used without modifying the anchor well too much, and that's going to require being up at the front of the boat while we're operating the winch and flaking the chain, as opposed to just letting it drop into a deep well, which would take quite a bit of modification to the boat to make that happen. So I'm going to start running you through the wiring setup and then we'll go from there. Okay, so the cable is very heavy duty. It has to be heavy duty because it's quite a big load, up to 70 amps, and it's a long distance. So that's why we need such a heavy duty cable, reducing voltage drop. The cable itself costs around about $700. So, ay caramba, amigo. Here we have the battery well for the house batteries and the start battery. With a bit of thought and consultation, we've come to the conclusion we'll be hooking up the start battery to the winch so that we have the main house battery, so we're always going to be our reserve. So if for some reason the winch or some other load, i.e. the starter motor, has drained the start battery, I'll be able to jump start the starter motor if I need to by just simply hooking up a set of jump leads from the house batteries to the start battery. And that means I can always start the engine if I need to. But it also means that if the winch somehow overloads the battery and we get a short of some sort, for whatever reason, then if it blows up a battery, it's only going to blow up a $200 battery as opposed to $1,500 of battery. So it's a brand new day and I only got halfway through running cables yesterday, but I figured out exactly where they're going to go. First thing I'm going to do is fit the circuit breaker into the cable. There was a lot of deliberation about where to put the circuit breaker. Cal, the boat father, he made a very valid point that having this up at the anchor well means, it's a waterproof switch by the way, means that if you overload the circuit, you're there and you can reset the circuit breaker very quickly and proceed with your anchoring activities. The only downside of that is you've got to make more holes up there. Think about a situation where the bow is plunging through waves, getting not just spray but fully dunked. So I guess having the switch back at the battery well means that you do, on the odd occasion, you're going to overload the circuit. It's a long walk back to get to it if you're on your own. Another good guide, my brother-in-law Chad, is a Sparky, and he also said these are not to protect the motor or the device, it's more to protect the cabling all the way along, because if we get a short along that bit of cable anywhere between the battery and the winch, this is only going to flick off at the winch end. So you're not actually protecting the cable as well. The cable's not cheap and the cable can melt and all sorts of things. So I guess I've decided it's going to be a walk back to this on the occasion that happens. Hopefully it doesn't happen very often. So here I've marked out my my little hole at the back, drill, cut. I'll be using a vacuum to try and reduce the amount of fiberglass dust. At the back of this cupboard is where the cable is coming through. I'll be cutting the active lead, that'll be terminaled onto that. Terminal ends swaged on at the battery end. I'm leaving the active disconnected, and then I'm going to be cable tying these together out of the way. They come through into this cupboard and to the back of the circuit breaker. I go through that cupboard. Underneath these cupboards, you'll see the active lead there. I've actually tied that into underneath this with these little cable clips, I should say. Pull these through to the next room where I'll be having the junction box solenoid controller. Yeah, there's the controller mounted there on that bulkhead. I haven't tightened these nuts up yet because I've got to run through some switching wires which will piggyback onto those terminals, and then they go through here underneath that cover through to the main V-berth. So here we are in the V-berth, and I've removed the paneling here where that cavity where there's already some existing wiring, navigation light and a power point in the anchor well. I wanted to be able to somehow attach them to the top because I could see that could potentially drop down. So I bought these little adhesive lugs and I tried to stick one on there, and it didn't last, it just fell off. So what I've done now is scraped off the little adhesive pad, and I've just trialled one. I actually mixed up some 5-minute araldite, pressed it onto there and just had a little bit of tape on there just to hold it in place. And what you can do then, these little lugs have little holes in them that you can then attach a cable tie through. That's really solid. It feels like that little anchor is going to hold a cable on there. So what I'm going to do now is glue a whole heap of these along here. Here I am here, pulling the cable through to the front of the V-berth, where I'll be attaching it underneath there with those glued on keeper lugs. Go through a little hole just up there above the fan, through there to the anchor well. I really don't know why I'm bothering, but I'm sure it'll all pay off in the end. So that clip system seems to be working a treat. I'm really happy with that. I'll finish tying all this up and I'll be able to put that cover back on. With the heavy duty cabling now in position, safely tucked away up to the anchor well, it was time to remove the old winch. Mind you, there was nothing wrong with the old Muir winch other than that it was manual. I've spent a few days doing the wiring to get the power up to the winch. Today was basically about organising the cutout for the new winch. So that's my cutout. It requires a 71mm hole. So this is the tool for the job. A really good quality 70mm hole saw because I'm cutting through 40mm of deck. This was the existing hole for the chain, and this is the new hole that I cut for the new motor. The drive shaft goes down through there. And these are our 3 new 12mm holes for the mounting bolts. And those are the old holes. So because I had to line up the center line of the chain with the rollers on the anchor stem, the whole winch actually had to be over this way a little bit because of the design of the winch is a little bit different to the other winch. But the challenge for me this morning is to cut this out. It's about 40mm thick. And then I have to chamfer that whole back so that as the chain gets pulled back into the locker, and then before I fit the actual winch, I'm going to seal that with epoxy resin just so that moisture can't get in there and stay in there. So what I've done here is with the jigsaw I've cut a series of cuts so that as the blade is working around on this angle, the blade can continue to make a bit of a curve, and these will just pop off and release as we're going through, and it's not going to bind the blade in as much. Set the angle on that jigsaw, which is why it's good to have a good quality jigsaw. The jigsaw's actually taken that back, and this edge here is where the chain's going to want to feed back under and be flaked into the compartment. So I can finish that off now with a file. Rightio, that's all filed out. Now what I'm going to do is clean all the residue off with a bit of acetone, prepare this area for a bit of resin in here, and also a clean surface to be able to bed down the new winch onto. Mixed up a little resin there, then by the time that's set off, I'll be able to start installing this winch. Right, so that's just a dry fit, test fit, make sure the holes are in the right place. Yeah, now I'm going to pull that out. I'll apply some flexible sealant, and I'll be tightening the bolts up just enough to get a bit of squeeze out, and then I'll let it sit like that for a day before I tighten them up a bit more, so I get a little bit of seal compression. Once that sealant hardens up, it'll be like a gasket. And that's something I picked up off Troy and Pascal from Free Range Sailing when they did their install. Pretty excited, it looks really great. Looks like the chain's lining up well. In this application, I'm using the Fixtech Fix15 marine grade sealant, which has excellent movement capabilities with jointing. With a spanner here, I've just tightened up those 3 tensioning bolts, just enough to get some squeeze out. You'll see around there too, but that's not over tightening them. So I'll basically come back tomorrow, I'll back those nuts off and I'll apply some thread locker, and then I'll re-tension the bolts and give them a little bit more of a nip up. Having snugly fitted the new windlass body to the deck, the next step was to refit the protector plates. Okay, now comes the time to fit the electric motor to the actual spindle of the winch body. It comes pre-greased, but I'm just going to apply a little bit more grease to the actual spindle there. Big circlip that'll hold that in place, and then we're going to be using some Loctite on this retaining nut, which will go in under the bottom of that shaft, and then it'll be ready to connect up these power leads to it. And I've just got to fit the activating switch, and then we're good to go. I've clipped the motor into its aligned gear there, and I've offset it from center so that as we pull chain out to flake, it's not rubbing over the body of the motor. And it also means that the terminals here, which are the power in points for the motor, are tucked away out of the way, so the leads will be up here. I'll be able to tie them up to the top there so they're well out of the way of everything. Swaged on the terminal ends at this end, and I've used the double-walled insulating heat shrink, which also has a glue built into it, so it actually glues itself to the work. So these two are ready to go onto the terminal ends. In today's post has arrived the hand pendant, which is going to be the main operating switch up and down for the anchor. That's our socket, so I need to get that mounted in here in order for the pendant to be able to plug in and unplug when not needed. Okay, if you look here, this is where we've got power coming out for a deck wash pump. I've also got the switch wire coming through there and the power cables to the motor. So the power cables are already connected up to the motor. These switch wires run back to the controller box. I need to figure out a way to join these and still have a fairly waterproof situation without drilling big holes in the boat. You know, that's a sealed unit at the back, so it's not going to leak there. We drill a big hole here in this bulkhead. One, it's going to be ugly on the inside because it's all visible. The only reason this is not visible inside is because it's right up high and it runs underneath that paneling. So what I think I'm going to do is make up a mounting block or bracket, and then the wire will be the only thing that goes through that bulkhead, and then I'll be sealing up that little hole up there. So I've come up with the idea of making up a stainless bracket. I'm going to take this little one across the road where I can grind safely, drill my drill holes before I cut it out, and then I'll be having a fold here, so I'm bending a 90-degree bracket. It's rudimentary, but it's stainless steel and it's going to fit this plug fitting quite well. I've pre-drilled all the holes out. All I need now to do is fit this bracket against this. We'll be able to fit that to that. Placement of the remote pendant connector plug had to be as high as possible to escape moisture and chain stowage, yet easily locatable when in use. And that plug is obviously to cover it up when it's not in use. Then I'll be feeding this wire back through the same hole that wire's coming out of, and I'll be doing a join inside the boat, which will be tucked away out of the weather. Okay, so I've just crimped on some connectors for the switching wires, and I've used the round clip type so that if need be, that socket. If the polarity is not right on the up and down, then I can just unplug that and switch it around with the next wire. But I know I've got a common active and the other two wires, one's up, one's down, so I'll just leave it all exposed, give it a test and see whether I've got the up and down right, and then I can cover all this up and put it all away. So let's go hook up the other end, the mains power, to the battery, and we'll be able to give it a test. So there's our control box there. All the wires are hooked up to that, just close to the anchor end. That's all connected up now. We need to put our circuit breaker to on. Perfect. So, anchor winch installation is a success. I must say I'm pretty chuffed with how it's all gone. That's 4.5, 5 days worth of research and work, so it wasn't an easy, simple task, but it's going to give us daily satisfaction. I guess the last thing to do for the whole thing is to fit the chain back into the locker. I've sent that off to get regaled because it's starting to show a bit of rust. So that should be back tomorrow, and then I'll be able to feed it back into the locker electronically. So I've got my mate Brett coming around to give me a hand to flake this anchor chain on as we pull it out of the wheelbarrow. Just using a zip tie method, 10, 20, 30, then back to different colour, 40, 50, 60. And we'll have 80 metres of chain marked, and I can start feeding it into the chain locker. What do you mean don't make you talk? Everybody, this is Brett. Meet Brett. He's a hell of a nice guy. He's the sort of cruiser that you like to meet whilst cruising. It's from Monarch, Brett Nola, giving us a hand today. Thanks, Brett.
No worries, mate.
Awesome getting this chain on. So yeah, very exciting, shiny new chain. What do you reckon? Should I run the motors to charge the battery while it's happening? Or? It's probably not under a huge amount of load, is it?
Nah, it should be alright. It's got no weight on it.
No. Apart from stopping regularly to grind flat any galvanising dags left over from the hot dipping treatment that our 8mm anchor chain had, the almost 100 metres of chain went easily back into the locker. What do you think, Brett?
Beautiful. You are not going to know yourself, mate. You're going to be dropping it. Yeah. Nah, don't like it here. Let's move.
That's right. Instead of, oh, let's just stay here. So yeah, it is close in there, and the flake real test will be when we're in the real McCoy situation, how it all peels off again. If you found this episode to be helpful, please give us a like and share with a friend, as it really helps to get us more traction. You can also find some helpful links and resources to products we recommend in the video description below. Next week, Rachel rejoins the boat, where we jump back into the waters of the Keppel Islands, and we also stumble upon a horse camp drafting event, which is a first for Jess.